The riverbed of Imagawa roared with the voices of the combatants and the spectators. Stone throwing contests had always been Takechiyo's favourite, besides falconry of course. He was not supposed to be here, but the great commotion made the young lord forget about his studies. The problem was that due to his height, he could not see much. He pulled on his attendant's yukata. "Takeshi, take me on your shoulders." With a smile, the servant obliged, and Takechiyo climbed on his back. His friend, Sukegoro, turned to him. "I bet you the larger side will win." Takechiyo remained silent for a while, watching the contestants. "All right, I accept the bet," he replied. An hour later, the three of them were returning back to the village, a smug smile evident on Takechiyo's face. "How did you know?" asked Sukegoro. The smaller side knew of their numbers' disadvantage and would therefore fight twice as hard. They could also coordinate better. Listening to this, Takeshi made a mental note to notify his master of the young boy's innate talent for battle tactics. Welcome to our new episode on the Sengoku Jidai. In the previous episode, we concluded the series on the life of the second unifier of Japan, Toyotomi Hideyoshi. In today's video, we will turn back time a bit and take a closer look at the life of the third unifier and the first shogun of the Tokugawa shogunate, Tokugawa Ieyasu. Every week we release 3 new exclusive videos for our members and patrons. The Pacific War, the Eastern Front of World War II Prelude, and many other series, including the War of Spanish Succession, Punic Wars, Iberian Reconquista, Russian Revolution and Civil War, North African and Italian campaigns of World War II, and much more. It has been long overdue, but we have finally created a YouTube channel exclusively for our Kings and Generals podcasts. Please go and check out Kings and Generals podcast, home to the Pacific War Week by Week podcast and the Fall and Rise of China podcast, link in the description and pinned comment. To see those, as well as get access to our exclusive Discord, see our schedule, and get early access to all videos, join the ranks of our patrons and YouTube members via the links in the description and pinned comment. Thanks to our supporters for allowing us to continue doing our dream job. Ieyasu was born in Okazaki Castle of Mikawa Province on the 31st of January 1343, receiving the child's name of Takechiyo. His father was Matsudaira Hirotada, the lord of Okazaki and daimyo of the province, and his mother was Oda no Kata, the daughter of Mizuno Tadamasa, who was lord of Carrier Castle. Takechiyo was born in a difficult time for the Matsudaira clan. Mere months after his son's birth, Hirotada's uncle, Matsudaira Nobutaka, defected to the side of the Oda clan of Owari. At the same time, Tadamasa also passed away, leaving the leadership of the clan to his son Nobumoto, who also sided with Oda Nobuhide. Nobumoto was emboldened by the weakening of the Matsudaira clan and resumed his offensives in Mikawa. Hirotada, unable to directly confront the Matsudaira on the battlefield, sent Kagehi Shigetada to surrender Okazaki to Matsudaira Tadamoto. However, Shigetada's true mission was to assassinate the man, a dubious task which he successfully completed. An enraged Nobuhide gathered his troops to march to Okazaki and conquer Mikawa. Hirotada, lacking military strength, turned to Lord Imagawa Yoshimoto of Suruga province for assistance and offered Takechiyo as a hostage to the Imagawa. Young Takechiyo set off with a small escort of 50 armed men and 27 other companions and servants. Yet when nearing Tawara, they were ambushed by Toda Yasumitsu, who had turned to Nobuhide's side. Yasumitsu and his brother kidnapped Takechiyo and brought him in front of their master in Kawatari Castle. Using Takechiyo's life as leverage, the Oda daimyo demanded that Hirotada surrender to Okazaki immediately. Hirotada was a warrior through and through, and determined that Takechiyo's death would serve only to solidify his alliance with the Imagawa. Thus, he refused. Upon seeing that Hirotada wouldn't bend, Nobuhide decided to keep Takechiyo hostage at Manshoji Temple in Nagoya. The boy stayed there for 3 years, but his captivity wasn't that bad. Because of his young age, everyone treated him with kindness, and he enjoyed far better conditions than any normal prisoner of war would expect. While Takechiyo was held hostage in Manshoji, the war between the two clans continued. With the assistance of the Imagawa forces, Hirotada was able to push back Nobuhide, but he wouldn't live long enough to enjoy his victory, as he died in 1549, likely of disease, although some suspected foul play. His rival Nobuhide also followed him to the grave at roughly the same time, leaving temporarily his eldest but illegitimate son, Nobuhiro, in charge of the clan. The Imagawa army, led by Yoshimoto's uncle, Sesai, besieged Nobuhiro's forces at Anjo. With Sesai's forces threatening to conquer the province completely, Nobunaga agreed to end the conflict and save his trapped half-brother by releasing Takechiyo. The 9-year-old boy was then transferred to Sumpu after a brief stay in Okazaki, where he paid his respects to his father's grave. Takechiyo's time in the Imagawa capital was similar to what one would expect of a lord of his age, minus the freedom to travel as he pleased. Wanting to foster a loyal and dependable ally, Yoshimoto provided everything young Takechiyo could possibly need. Naturally, the boy was not alone in Tsuruga, as 2 guardians and 7 pages, roughly his own age, accompanied him. These men would later stand by an adult Tokugawa Ieyasu's side, and included individuals such as Sakakibara Sadamasa, Abe Mototsugu, and the man who would become his closest friend in life, Tori Mototada. In Tsuruga, there was also another noble boy with whom Takechiyo developed a close relationship. Takechiyo spent much of these blissful childhood years ignoring Sesai's tutelage in favor of his favorite pastime activity, hawking, but these idyllic days would soon come to an end. When Takechiyo reached the age of 15, a coming-of-age ceremony was held at Sumpu, with Yoshimoto himself becoming the Eboshoya, something similar to his godfather. The Imagawa daimyo also gave Takechiyo a new name. He would, from then on, be known as Matsudaira Jirosaburo Motonobu. He did not keep that name for long, and the following year he married Yoshimoto's niece and changed it to Motoyasu after his grandfather Kiyoyasu, whom he admired. The following spring, Motoyasu finally went on his first campaign, seeking to recover the lands of West Mikawa, which had come under Nobunaga's control after the betrayal of Suzuki Shigeteru. After gathering his men in Ozaki, Motoyasu moved towards Terabe and was able to capture some of the outlying fortifications. However, the main castle proved a tough nut to crack, so the Matsudaira daimyo was content with setting the fortress on fire and retiring safely. A counterattack launched by Oda forces was easily repelled. Motoyasu returned triumphantly to Sumpu and Yoshimoto, who granted him gifts, but did not allow him to relocate to Okazaki permanently. This didn't affect Motoyasu, who continued adding military successes to his resume. The next year, he was tasked with resupplying the castle of Otaka, which had come under siege from forces loyal to the Oda. The castle had been built as an outlying fortress by Nobunaga, and had recently come under Imagawa control after its castellan had defected to Yoshimoto's side. Naturally, Nobunaga was determined to reclaim Otaka, and his forces held a tight grip on the castle. Not only that, but 4 other Oda-controlled castles, Ueshizu, Manue, Umezu, and Terabe, were in close proximity and blocked the approach. As they were approaching the area, Motoyasu ordered around 1,000 of his men to attack the forts of Terabe and Umezu during the night to create a diversion. Motoyasu himself led the second contingent, which numbered roughly 800 strong, stayed with the provisions train and hid around a mile from Otaka. The diversionary assault worked miracles, as the attackers were able to penetrate the defences of the 2 castles and drew the garrisons of the other 2, who, having heard the great commotion, came to the assistance of their comrades. With the Oda forces occupied elsewhere, Motoyasu led the provisions train safely into Otaka. Having established himself in the eyes of Yoshimoto as a competent commander, Motoyasu was ordered to continue his military operations for the rest of the year, and of course was included in Yoshimoto's greatest operation in July of the following year. Yoshimoto and the Imagawa clan were descended from the Minamoto clan and had close blood ties with the ruling Ashikaga shoguns. Having witnessed the decline of the Ashikaga for many years, Yoshimoto had prepared to march into Kyoto and perhaps claim the title of shogun for himself. After all, his lineage would permit him to do so. In 1560, Yoshimoto was one of the few daimyos in Japan who commanded a strong enough force that was close enough to the capital to have a shot at seizing the ultimate prize. In the summer, he made his move, following the Tokaido Road through Mikawa at the head of a large force, which some sources estimate to have been around 40,000 men, while others put that number to around 25,000. Naturally, Motoyasu and his hardened Mikawa samurai were part of this force when Yoshimoto moved into Owari and began reducing the Oda border castles. Motoyasu's regiment managed to capture and then destroy Marune, and for this deed, the Imagawa daimyo gave him command of Otaka and allowed him to recuperate there. Meanwhile, Yoshimoto's own men had captured Ueshizu and had set up camp near Dengaku-Hizama, where they were celebrating their success. What happened next was one of the biggest military upsets in military history. Oda Nobunaga had managed to approach Yoshimoto's camp undetected. Enjoying the element of surprise, his outnumbered soldiers managed to crush the Imagawa invaders, killing Yoshimoto in the process. Before long, news of Yoshimoto's death reached Motoyasu. After confirming the validity of this death and realizing that Nobunaga could now strike in his direction, Motoyasu cautiously retreated to Mikawa. Without the Imagawa daimyo to obstruct him, he moved into Okazaki after the Imagawa troops abandoned it. From there, he launched a small incursion into Owari to put the Oda forces in check, but took no further action. Nobunaga made no move towards Mikawa at that time, but in the following year, he extended his hand to Motoyasu to form an alliance. Motoyasu was caught between a rock and a hard place. Yoshimoto's heir, Ujizane, was an aesthete, having inherited his father's obsession with the arts. Yoshimoto was not a great warrior, and Ujizane was even less so. It was therefore evident to Motoyasu that Ujizane was not the man to rely on during such dangerous times. On the other hand, the Imagawa still held many hostages of the Matsudaira clan, and had been a long-standing ally. After much deliberation, Motoyasu decided to throw in his lot with the Oda, and travelled to Kiyosu to solidify his new alliance. Naturally, this move alarmed Ujizane, who questioned Motoyasu's intention. Still, he was able to convince him that his journey to Owari only served to placate the Oda daimyo, and buy some time of respite for both the Matsudaira and the Imagawa clans. As Ujizane still held Motoyasu's wife and firstborn son as hostages, the Matsudaira daimyo could not yet openly side with the Oda, or go against the Imagawa. But in 1562, he came up with a plan to overcome this obstacle. He sent 80 men to infiltrate Kaminogo Castle in the southern part of Mikawa, which also marked the westernmost point of Imagawa's border. Posing as Imagawa soldiers, they entered the castle. Once inside, the group of shinobi managed to cause great commotion by setting fire to buildings and killing Udono Nagateru, who was Kaminogo's commander and Ujizane's cousin, and capturing his sons. Ujizane agreed to exchange Motoyasu's wife and children for them, but in reprisal, he executed some of the hostages that hadn't been included in the deal. Among these was Motoyasu's father-in-law, who was forced to commit seppuku. Motoyasu would go on to solidify his alliance with Nobunaga by marrying his firstborn son, who assumed the name Nobuyasu, to Nobunaga's daughter, Toku. The new name, as you might have already guessed, served to flatter the Oda warlord, who was the senior partner in this alliance. Speaking of name changes, Motoyasu would change his name once again, shedding the prefix Moto, which he had taken in honor of his master Yoshimoto. From 1563 onwards, he would be known as Ieyasu, the prefix Ie in honor of the previous shoguns who had it in their name, and especially Minamoto no Yoshi-Ie, a legendary samurai of the Heian period, whom Ieyasu regarded highly. Imagawa Ujizane was not a man suited for war, but before Ieyasu could make a move against him, he would first need to secure his rule on Mikawa. Like in many other regions in Japan during that time, religious sects had gathered significant power and threatened the established order in Ieyasu's home province. Some of these sects, known as the Ikki, had even declared their autonomy, collecting their own taxes and raising their own forces. To make matters worse for Ieyasu, they even controlled forts close to Okazaki, becoming the master of the roads and communications to and from his seat. Moreover, in late 1563, when Ieyasu demanded a part of the rice stockpiles in Jogaji Temple, an armed uprising erupted. The armed peasants and warrior monks were even joined by some of Ieyasu's retainers, who held a grudge against him for the slaughter of the hostages in Simpu, or were with the rebels out of religious sympathy. Others joined Ieyasu's enemies simply because they thought the crisis provided a good opportunity for them to obtain greater power. However, the majority of Ieyasu's men remained loyal to their master and helped him put down the uprising. On the 15th of January of the following year, the two sides clashed at the battle that would largely determine the outcome of the uprising. Forces from the Honshuji and Shomanji temples marched to capture Okazaki, knowing that Ieyasu was absent. Indeed, Ieyasu had left 2 days earlier to defend Kamiwada Fortress, where a bullet came close to ending his life. The remaining troops engaged the rebels at Ohira. When news of the battle reached Ieyasu's ears, he rushed with his uncle, Mizuno Nobumoto, to attack the Ikki's rear and engage them at Akukizaka. Leading heroically from the front line, Ieyasu inspired his troops, and even managed to win back some of those who had previously defected to the Ikko Ikki. The victory at Akukizaka, while it did not bring an immediate end to the Ikki uprising, significantly weakened the religious sects and convinced many of the rebels to return to Ieyasu. By mid-February, the forces of the Mikawa Ikki had weakened so much that they offered peace terms to Ieyasu. The rebels asked for pardons for the lives of the participants and the leaders, and for the temple grounds to be kept as they were before. Ieyasu, whose top priority at that time was to bring order to Mikawa, quickly agreed, and peace returned to the land. Ieyasu did indeed spare the lives of those who had rebelled against him, and he even forgave some of them, but not all of them went unpunished. A number of them, including Masanobu, had their lands and titles stripped away and were forced into exile. A few months later, as the influence of the temples had weakened even more, Ieyasu went back on his promise and ordered the temples to be demolished. When the monks tried to complain, Ieyasu explained that he thought keeping the grounds as they were before meant before the temples were constructed, and therefore he was returning the land to nature. With no armies left to oppose him, the monks simply accepted their fate. Having secured control of Mikawa province, Matsudaira Ieyasu could now turn his gaze outwards. His alliance with the Oda to the north gave him the freedom to deal with the Imagawa to the east. After all, he had some loose ends with Ujizane to tie. And while the Imagawa daimyo was not skilled in matters of war, the Imagawa clan still commanded numerous soldiers from two provinces, Totomi and Suruga. For the Imagawa to fall, Ieyasu would need to enlist the help of the Tiger of Kai, Takeda Shingen. However, Nobunaga's adventures in Kansai and his dealings with the shogun would also drag Ieyasu into his wars. We will continue to cover the rise of Tokugawa Ieyasu as this series goes on, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our patrons and YouTube members can watch more than 200 exclusive videos. Join their ranks via the link in the description or by pressing the join button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel and we will catch you on the next one.